Unexplainable Connection, Mboti, September 30th, 2010. As I stood there in the courtroom listening to the judge's ruling, my heart felt like it was being ripped apart. It was as if my soul was being dragged through a thorny bush. The judge's words were like a hammer hitting a nail into my heart, piercing it with every hit. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "There's no proof of physical abuse," the judge said. "But last month's incident shows tension and disagreement between the two of you." I listened, barely registering his words. All I could think was, how could this be happening to me? But what about the emotional abuse? What about his threats to destroy me? How could I prove that? How could I show the scars that weren't visible to the naked eye? I had come to court seeking justice for the misery I had suffered at my husband's hands. But now I felt like the law had failed me. I looked over at Bandil, the man who had been mentally torturing me for years. The smirk on his face was a clear indication that he had won. He had always made it clear that he had power over me, and now the law had proved him right. However, it was my word against his, and Bandil had always been good at playing the victim. I couldn't hold my tears any longer. It had to break free, and it finally did, streaming down my face like a waterfall. The judge's words struck me like a storm, shattering the fragments of hope that clung to my heart. In his deep baritone voice, he advised us, embark on therapy, mediation, or something. Live apart to determine if a divorce was an option. An option? In this brokenness, I questioned my fate, whispering to myself, am I still granted the choice to reside in his presence? Must I return to the abyss of torment and agony that I had endured? And what about the relentless fear and anxiety that haunted my every breath for what felt like an eternity? The mere thought of revisiting those shattered memories sent shivers down my spine, each fragment a shard of pain digging deep into my soul. How could I bear to tread upon the path strewn with the remnants of a broken love, knowing it would only lead me back to the shadows I fought so hard to escape? The mere possibility of subjecting myself to such anguish threatened to engulf me in a tempest of sorrow. For years my spirit had weathered the relentless storm of uncertainty, my heart battered by the waves of anxiety that crashed upon its fragile shores. How could I willingly return to a life where fear overshadowed hope, where the weight of apprehension pressed upon me like an unyielding burden? The thought alone suffocated the flame of resilience that still flickered within, leaving me gasping for the oxygen of serenity that had long eluded my grasp. I found myself standing at the crossroads of my existence, torn between the fragments of a shattered past and the glimmers of an uncertain future. The judge's words echoed in the chambers of my mind, hoping that within its depths, the answers to my turmoil would be revealed. With my last hope destroyed by the ruling, I contemplated whether the whispers of my pain and the echoes of my suffering would find their rightful place in the complexity of my future. And as I stood on the cliff of choice, I used the little strength in me to pray for the strength to navigate this tumultuous waters of my emotions in search of a haven where I could finally find healing and reclaim the fragments of my shattered soul. As the judge's eyes fell on me, I felt a lump form in my throat. "Always think about your children," he said. "I read you have 3 boys, and the youngest is just about 2 months old?" I nodded, couldn't hold back my tears. That was all I had been doing for the past 10 years. I had always thought of my children first, trying to protect them from the toxic environment that had become our home. But now, even the law couldn't save us. My heart felt like it was being crushed, like I was carrying a boulder in my chest. Bandil and I first crossed paths in our hometown when his father, the state attorney, came to scrutinize the construction firm where my father was employed. This visit was part of an inquiry into allegations of the company's mistreatment of its workers. Both of us hail from South Africa. At that time, Bandil was navigating his final semester of law school. Raised to uphold his father's admirable legacy, he was very much his father's pride, a sentiment amplified by his status as the only son and youngest of 6 siblings. It was clear that any woman entering Bandil's life would face high expectations. That day I brought lunch to my dad at the construction site where he worked. That's where I met Bandil. Our eyes locked, and it felt like instant love. He was immediately smitten, drawn to me as a bee is to honey. As time passed, our relationship deepened, culminating in his proposal. While Bandil's mother and sisters disapproved of me, feeling I wasn't a match for their social circles, his father welcomed me warmly, offering his blessing and expressing joy at having me as his daughter-in-law. Uniting in marriage with Bandil, my soulmate, felt like a revitalizing breeze. The memory of our wedding day remains vivid, filled with joy and anticipation for our shared future. However, his father's connections facilitated his earlier move to the United States, a fact he often used to assert that he had saved me from less favorable circumstances. But as time went on, Bandil's true colors started to show. First, he claimed our first son, Arno, wasn't his because of his skin complexion. He questioned, "Why is Arno too white?" to my disgust. "Bandil, you were my first for Christ's sake. I have never known any other man but you." It didn't stop there. He secretly did a DNA test, which confirmed that Arno was his son. Then, he became controlling and abusive, constantly threatening me and making hurtful statements. Many days he will scream in my face, "You from the slum, just be grateful that I brought you into this great country to polish you up, you stinking bitch." Oh, I get it. Because the United States supports bitches like you think you will come here to lord over me? I am your husband. I am your lord, tapping his finger on the side of my head. The earlier you get that into your head, the better. I can't count several times he had called me Kayalicha bitch, fat pig, or whistled at me like I didn't have a name. Yes, I come from a modest background. My father was a bricklayer with a meager income, and my mother, a retired schoolteacher, relied on government pension, which was hardly sufficient. As the second of 4 children, life was challenging, but our parents ensured we all received an education, aspiring for a better future for us. Does Bandile really need to constantly remind me of this? Is it necessary for him to throw it in my face all the time? I felt like a prisoner in my own home. Bandil had taken away my freedom and my sense of self-worth. I was just a puppet in his hands, doing whatever he wanted. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. I am only happy when I'm at work, but the thought that my children are with him breaks my heart. Finally, I realized that I couldn't live like this anymore. I couldn't let Bandil continue to control and abuse us. I had to break free. I thought I could find justice from the judicial system, but I guess he won since he understood the game as an attorney. The judge's final words pulled me out of my thoughts. "I hereby dismiss the case." With those words, my hopes of finding justice vanished. The courtroom began to spin, and I felt like I was about to faint. I stumbled out of the courtroom, trying to hold myself together. My heart felt like it was in a vice, and I could barely breathe. How could I go back to that house with Bandil? How could I keep my children safe? I thought back to my conversation with my best friend, Brenda. She had been my champion for life. She urged me to take action, to stand up for myself and my children. But now, as I stood there, defeated and broken, I regretted taking Bandil to court. As I stepped outside, the sun shone brightly, but I couldn't feel its warmth. My world had turned grey, and I felt like I was drowning. I took a deep breath and decided to follow the judge's advice. I would move out of the house, away from Bandile, and stay with Brenda until I find peace for myself and my children. But deep down, I knew that the scars would stay with me forever. They were like a tattoo etched onto my soul, a constant reminder of the pain and suffering I had endured. 3 months later, I was determined to make a fresh start. I had just rented an apartment for me and my children. I knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but I was determined to succeed. As we walked into our new home, I couldn't help but notice how empty it felt. The walls were bara, and the floor was cold and lifeless. But I saw beyond the emptiness and imagined all the memories we would create in this place. It was like a blank canvas, waiting for us to paint our story on it. So I applied for another job, eager to provide for my children and ensure we wouldn't depend on government welfare. days turned into weeks. Our apartment slowly transformed into a home. The walls were adorned with pictures of us, and the floor was covered with toys and books. Our home was a reflection of us, full of love, warmth, and laughter. But the struggle to provide for my children never stopped. I worked tirelessly, day in and day out, always pushing myself to the limit. It was like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, and I was afraid that one day I would crumble under the pressure. But despite the challenges, I never gave up. With my words of affirmation, Mboti, you're stronger, you're wiser, you're better, I reminded myself of the reason why I was doing all of this. My children. They were my light in the darkness, my motivation to keep going. December 30, 2010. My dear friend Brenda visited us. My eyes were vacant and my shoulders were slumped as if I was carrying the weight of the world on my back. My boys were running around the house, but even their laughter couldn't break the heavy atmosphere. Brenda could sense all my despair, my sadness, and my hopelessness. It was as if my soul had been shattered into a million pieces, and I was trying to glue it back together, but the pieces just wouldn't fit. Brenda encouraged me to take care of myself, find joy in the things I love, and never settle for less, even if I ever decided to date again. I laughed at the thought of dating again, as I was still trying to survive and care for my boys. But Brenda was right. Not in the dating part, but in taking care of my boys and be a good role model for them. Brenda's words reminded me of my parents' advice to me. Always be the best version of yourself to your children. In all you do, don't forget to bring out the best in them. Although at that moment I felt like a bird trying to sing in the middle of a storm, but the wind was too strong and the melody got lost in the chaos. Brenda reminded me about her church and emphasized the importance of having a good spiritual and physical support system. This was not the first time she invited me to visit her church, but due to my work schedule, I could not go with her. She had graciously gone with my children, constantly teaching the two older ones how to pray and read the Bible during our stay in her residence. I wished I had her confidence, her ability to face the world with such strength and determination. Then she invited us to the New Year's Eve service at her church, and I agreed to go, even though I had reservations. Then came the New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2010. I stepped into the church. The smell of the atmosphere filled my nostrils, transporting me back to my childhood. It was New Year's Eve, and I had decided to come back to church after being away for so long. I felt like the prodigal daughter returning home to her father. The sanctuary was filled with people dressed in their best outfits, ready to usher in the new year with praises and worship. I looked around and saw the stained glass windows illuminated by the moonlight, casting colorful reflections on the wooden pews. The atmosphere was charged with emotions and energy of people who were pouring their hearts to God with hymns. I closed my eyes and let the words of the hymn soak over me, soothing my soul. I felt like a phoenix rising from the ashes, ready to start anew. My years with Bandil had been burdensome, filled with mistakes and regrets, but now I could make things right. As I looked around the church, I felt a sense of belonging that I had never felt before. I knew this was the support system Brenda had been talking about, and I was grateful for it. The preacher took the pulpit and began to speak about new beginnings and the power of forgiveness. I felt like he was talking directly to me, and my heart swelled with emotions. Tears streamed down my face as I realized how much I had missed being in the presence of God. The clock struck midnight, and the congregation erupted in cheers and applause. I felt a sense of joy and peace wash over me as I lifted my hands in praise. This was the moment I had been waiting for. A new year, a new me. I felt a renewed sense of purpose and direction as the service ended. I walked out of the church with my head held high, feeling like I could conquer anything. The moon was high in the sky, casting a soft glow over the world. It was as if it was signaling the start of a new chapter in my life. And so, as the new year began, I stepped into the unknown, confident that I could face whatever challenges lay ahead. First Sunday of the year, January the 2nd, 2011. I went to church with my sons, ready to start the year off right. As we were seated, I noticed a man 2 rows before me. He looked like life had beaten him so severely that he was kneeling and sobbing uncontrollably. I could feel his pain and it hit me hard. I wanted to reach out to comfort him, but I didn't know how. I tried to focus on the service, but my mind kept drifting back to this man. I felt as if I could see his pain, and it was breaking my heart. The pastor's words were like a distant murmur, and I struggled to concentrate. After service, Brenda introduced me to the pastor and his wife, who prayed for me and my boys, and I could feel their love and kindness surrounding me. Many months and years later, I reflected on the tumultuous journey that led me to where I am today. I became a full member of the Love of God's Church, and my faith has been the one constant in my life. When Bandil filed for full custody of our children, I felt like I was drowning in a sea of hopelessness again. He was determined to make me suffer, to prove to the world that I was unworthy of being a mother. He painted me as mentally unstable and unfit to care for my children, and it seemed like the world was against me. But the love and support of the church community gave me the strength to keep fighting. Pastor's wife, Liora, was my rock, always there to lend a listening ear and offer encouragement. She saw me through the darkest days of my divorce and never once judged me for the mistakes I made along the way. Through it all, I never lost sight of my goal, to be the best mother I could be to my children. So I poured all my energy into building a better life for us, working tirelessly to complete my bachelor's and master's degrees in education. Yes, the Kayalicha bitch has a bachelor's and a master's degree. And yes, the fat pig started going to the gym to shade off all the accumulated pounds in my body. Although this journey was hard, it was my way of showing my children that nothing can hold us back if we set our minds to it. But Bandile never stopped trying to tear me down. He knew that the only way to hurt me was to attack the one thing I loved most, my children. So he would do anything to trigger me, hoping I would lash out and give him ammunition for the custody battle. But I refused to give him the satisfaction. Instead, I turned my pain into purpose. I volunteered to tutor teenagers in the church, using my experience to guide them through their struggles. It was my way of giving back to the community that had supported me through the darkest days of my life. My faith sustained Mem, my community uplifted me, and my children have inspired me to keep pushing forward. I am not the broken, unstable woman that Bandil tried to make me out to be. Instead, I am a survivor, a fighter, and a believer in the power of love to conquer even the greatest of hardships. So, I chose love. I chose forgiveness. I chose to turn the other cheek whenever Bandil desired to slam me with horrendous accusations. Months later, while working out at the gym, I experienced a sudden uneasiness. Something felt off. It began with a mild headache and a sensation of dizziness. What could this mean?